Inventory is up, rates are high, and everyone's asking the same thing. Should I buy now or wait? Here's the reality. If you wait for the perfect time, you might miss your window completely. And if you jump in too fast, you could be stuck with a payment that wrecks your budget. The cost of getting this wrong isn't just financial, it's peace of mind. 2025 the year you finally buy a house, or the year you regret rushing in? Let's take a minute and break it down. Housing inventory is up 33% year over year and at the highest levels that we've seen in many markets since 2020. On top of that, we have 9 states that have returned to pre-pandemic levels. And if it couldn't get any worse, buyer demand is down. Not because people don't want to own homes, but primarily due to affordability. We got high rates and high prices, which at the moment gives us the most balanced playing field that we've had in almost 5 years, resulting in buyers having more leverage in many markets out there. But at the same time, it's important to understand that not all real estate is created equal. Nearly 1/3, over 30% of all housing inventory at the moment in the United States is located in just 2 states. Texas and Florida, which is leading a lot of buyers to sit on the sidelines to wait to see what happens. Are you going to see home prices decline even further? Are you going to see another housing crash, a repeat of 2008? Or is this another missed opportunity? But at the same time, you have markets like the Northeast where inventory is still really, really low. Buyers are having to fight to get their offer accepted, having to go over the asking price, waiving contingencies, taking us all the way back to the same markets that we saw in 2021. So the question of should you buy now or should you wait not only depends on where you are in your life, but it also depends on where you are locally. Because at the end of the day, you shouldn't really care what's happening in Florida or Texas if you're located here in Southern California. And at the same time, if you're located in the Northeast, you shouldn't care what's happening here in Southern California. In fact, I'm going to say something right now that's going to piss a lot of people off. Buying a home isn't about picking it at the right price, at the right interest rate, or even the perfect monthly payment. It's all about buying when it's the right time in your life. So when does buying actually make sense in 2025? Well, in my opinion, it all comes down to having stability in your life. You not only need job stability, you need relationship stability, you need income stability, but in addition to that, you need to be thinking 5, 7, 10 years from now. Buying a home is not like buying a stock. And with that being said, it's not something that you need to pay attention to every single day. Buying a home is all about locking in your housing costs over the long term. Yes, I understand in many markets out there, it's more expensive to buy a home today than it is to rent. But what I can tell you is that over a 10 to 15 year period of time, it's going to cost you more money to rent that same house than it is to buy that house today. And the earlier in your life you can become a homeowner, the earlier in your life you can fix that housing cost. Because guess what? There is no 30-year fixed rent. Now, I know what many of you are saying, well, why would I buy that house today if I could just rent it cheaper, take that money, stick it into the stock market, make money on my gains, make money on that money, and that way I don't have to worry about owning a home. I don't have to worry about a down payment. I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Well, the primary reason is because most renters don't have the discipline to take that difference and invest it into the stock market to create that same generational wealth. And that's why homeowners have a 40 times greater net worth than those of renters. Now, correlation does not prove causation, but being a homeowner and fixing your housing costs does come with benefits that makes it a little bit easier to create that generational wealth. And the first is every single time you make your housing payment, when you're a homeowner, a portion of that payment is actually paying down the principal balance of that mortgage, which in turn is building equity. Now, again, I know what many of you are out there saying. Well, the first couple of years of paying a housing payment, all you're doing is paying mostly interest anyway. You're paying very little towards the principal. Well, guess what? When you're renting, you're paying 0 towards the principal. In addition to that, homes have appreciated on average about 4.6% per year over the last 65 years. In fact, when you look at this chart here, there's only been 7 down years in the entire United States over that period of time. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen every single year, but what I'll tell you is if you took away the great financial crisis, which was actually caused by real estate, there were only 2 down years in that entire period of time. So the reality is homes are going to appreciate over time, and that's another big benefit of becoming a homeowner, because not only are you paying down the principal balance of that loan, putting money into a forced savings account, your home is also likely appreciating, adding additional equity. And while I understand that interest rates are currently high at the moment, one of the biggest benefits of being a homeowner is that you can actually refinance if mortgage rates move down. That's something you can't do as a renter. Once you're a renter, that is your payment. And chances are it's going to increase somewhere between 3 to 5% every single year. But on the flip side, homeowners have that opportunity to take advantage of lower monthly payments if and when they present themselves. And that's why real estate is still the most reliable long-term wealth builder. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to rush out there and buy a house, because buying a house isn't for everyone. In fact, right now might not be a great time for you to buy a house. And one of the reasons I say that is if you have a shorter term time horizon, if you're not thinking 5, 7, 10 years from now, if you're just thinking, hey, this is going to be the home that I'm going to live in for the next 2 years because I'm moving out of state, or I'm using this home as a stepping stone. I'm going to buy it now. I'm going to sell it. I'm going to use the equity gain that comes from that property, and I'm going to buy my next home. If that's you, then I actually think you might need to pause and reconsider what you're doing. And that's because real estate can't be looked at in a short-term time horizon. Yes, the last 5 or so years have been completely abnormal to the upside, right? A lot of people that you probably know have bought homes, have gained equity, have been able to sell those homes, buy larger homes, and in some cases not have a mortgage at all because of how much equity they gain. But the key thing to understand is that's not normal. And the likelihood of us seeing that over the next 5 to 10 years is very, very low. I'm actually under the belief that we're going to see little to no appreciation in real terms over the next couple of years, which basically means we're going to see appreciation trend at the same rate of inflation, which is somewhere between 2 and 3%, which means home prices aren't necessarily going to get less expensive. They're just not going to appreciate at the same level that we've seen over the last couple of years. On top of that, if you're someone right now that has low credit scores, you have no money in the bank, you don't have job stability, you don't have relationship, financial stability, you don't have that stability in your life, then now isn't the right time to go buy a house. FOMO is real, I understand that, but rushing out to buy a house when you don't have all of the other pieces of the puzzle in place is the wrong approach. In fact, in my opinion, that ends up coming back to bite you. So I would rather you work on your credit score. I would rather you work on finding the right job in the right location, finding the right partner to buy a home with, versus rushing out and just trying to become a homeowner because you saw someone online tell you that you need to start investing or that you need to do this strategy or that strategy. And that's because everyone's situation is different. Just because it's the right time for your friends or your neighbors or someone you know to buy a home doesn't necessarily mean it's the right time for you. And I'll even go out and say that if you're buying a house now with the idea that the only way you can afford it is that interest rates have to move lower over the next couple of months or even a year or two so that you can actually refinance and afford that payment, now's not the right time. You need to be completely comfortable with that mortgage payment. You need to have money in the bank. You need to have reserves outside of your down payment and closing costs just in case something happens. You can still maintain that stability in your life. But on the flip side, if you're one of those people that's sitting there waiting because you think that home prices are going to drop, you think that interest rates are going to drop, you think that there's going to be this golden opportunity here in the next couple of months or the next couple of years, then I would also ask you to reconsider why you're waiting. I realize no one wants to catch a falling knife, but at the same time, you have to understand that the likelihood of 2008 repeating is very, very low. And that's because there were so many different things happening back then that created this entire catastrophe. And the reality is we don't have any of those in place today other than high prices. But I think it's also important to understand why we have high prices. It all comes back to supply and demand. When you have very little of something, in this case the supply of homes, and you have more buyer demand than you have of that thing, that's what creates prices to move higher. And that's exactly what we've had over the last couple of years. And the reason it looks so crazy is because a lot of the demand was pulled forward by those super low interest rates. You wouldn't have had that number of transactions. You wouldn't have had all of that chaos happen in 2020 through 2022 if interest rates weren't so low, because some of those buyers, quite frankly, weren't ready. The only reason they bought during that period of time is because it became way more affordable than it had ever been. So what happened was you took buyers that would have bought in 2023, 2024, 2025, and you crammed them all into a couple of years. So you created all this additional demand on top of very, very little supply. So right now it looks like, hey, we have all of this inventory and now we have no buyer demand. No, what we have now is a more normal housing market, but still not completely in favor of buyers. Yes, it's more balanced than it's been But with that said, sellers are not giving away homes. So as a buyer in this market, you have to focus on what you can control. And what I tell people is work on your credit score. That one number impacts the home buying process more than anything else. In my opinion, it's more important than down payment in many ways. And that's because you can still get really, really good terms with a low down payment if you have great credit scores. You have to understand that credit score impacts your monthly payment more than most people realize. On top of that, it also impacts how much you can afford to buy. So the better your credit score, the lower interest rate you're going to get, which in turn is going to give you a lower monthly mortgage payment and also allow you to qualify for more homes. Now, second to credit score, I would say focus on your down payment. The more money you can put aside to put down on that home, the better you're going to feel about making that monthly mortgage payment. Now, if I were someone who was sitting on the sidelines waiting to buy a house and I knew that mortgage payment was going to be, $1,500, $2,000 higher than my current rent payment, what I would start doing is making that payment every single month. I would make that $3,500 rent payment, if you will, and then I would take that $2,000 extra dollars that I would be paying towards my mortgage, and I would start putting that into a savings account and let that start to accumulate to add to my down payment. On top of that, you start getting comfortable making that higher payment so that when it actually happens, it's not that big of a shock. And as we discussed earlier, it also comes down to income and job stability. You need to have stability with those things, right? If you think you're going to be relocated out of state for a job, or you're leaving because of a relationship and you're going across country to live with them, then buying a house isn't the right thing for you at this time. Instead, work on the things that we talked about so that when you have that stability in your life, you're in a great position to then become a homeowner. I think one of the key things to understand in our current environment is that the things that are bothering you the most are out of your control. You can't control mortgage rates. You can't control house prices. You can't control what the president's doing or the tariffs or the inflation or any of that stuff. But you can control your decisions. So you should be asking yourself, is it the right time for me? Am I doing this for the right reasons? On top of that, you should be asking yourself, can you comfortably afford it? Now, that doesn't mean that you like the payment. It just means, can I do this if I have to? If mortgage rates don't come down, can I continue to make this payment? Do I have money in the bank? If something happens with my job, am I going to be okay to make this payment while I continue to find another job? Now, with that said, I think it's also important to understand that renting is not a failure. It doesn't mean you're not a worthy human being. Renting is buying you patience until you're ready to become a homeowner. Basically, it's buying you time, but at the same time, you don't want to buy that time forever because at some point in your life, you probably want to retire. So the earlier in your life you can fix your housing costs and hopefully pay off your mortgage so that when you do decide to retire, you don't have this crazy rent payment that you have to make every single month. Yes, you'll still have property taxes. Yes, you'll still have homeowners insurance. But the reality is renters are paying those anyway because they're just getting passed along from the landlord. So just remember that waiting also comes with risk. The risk of higher prices, the risk of higher rates, and also the risk of fewer choices out there if buyer demand does increase. So my opinion is don't wait for a crash, but rather watch for an opportunity that fits your life. Now, if you're still unsure, I've done tons and tons of videos here on YouTube to help walk first-time home buyers through this process. So do me a favor, check out those videos on my channel. And if you found any value at all, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate you watching. See you next time.